It was supposed to be just another rainy night at the hospital. Cold. Quiet. Predictable. But when Nurse Claire Robbins saw a man shivering under the awning, soaked to the bone, something made her stop. She didn't ask questions. Didn't call security. She just opened the door and said, "Come in." He looked like a nobody, thin, tired, homeless. She offered him a blanket, a cup of tea, even snuck him into a back room so he could rest. The next morning, he was mopping the floors in borrowed scrubs. Everyone called him the new janitor. No one asked where he came from. No one, except Claire. Because something didn't add up. He didn't move like a man down on his luck. He noticed everything. Security cameras. Medical supply routes. Even the way staff logged prescriptions. What Claire didn't know was that this man wasn't who he claimed to be. And by the time she found out the truth, it was already too late. She hadn't just let in a stranger. She had given shelter to a man on a mission. And now, the very hospital she'd sworn to protect was about to collapse from the inside. All because of one rainy night. And one impossible choice. The rain had a way of silencing things. It muted the city's chaos, softened the edges of sirens and car horns, and turned the entrance of Mercy Hill Hospital into something that looked almost sacred. Claire Robbins, a third-shift nurse with caffeine in her veins and tiredness behind her eyes, was clocking out late again. Her shift had run long, charting delays, a code blue, an elderly patient who just wanted to talk. She pulled her coat tighter around her scrubs and stepped outside into the storm. That's when she saw him. At first, he looked like a shadow, slumped under the side awning, half hidden behind the vending machine no one ever refilled. His coat was thin and soaked through. His hands trembled as he clutched them between his knees, and his face, it wasn't the face of someone broken, but someone hiding. Claire stopped mid-step. "Sir," she called out, instinct taking over. "You can't stay out here like this. It's below 40. He barely looked up. "I'll be gone soon." Something in his voice cracked, like he hadn't used it in days. She moved closer, ignoring the cold stinging her ankles. "At least let me bring you something warm. I don't want trouble." "You're not causing any," she said softly. "I'm Claire. I'm a nurse here. Let me help." He didn't answer. Minutes later, she had him inside through the staff entrance, tucked away in a forgotten break room near maintenance. She tossed him a towel, handed him a hospital gown, and left a cup of lukewarm tea from the vending machine on the table. He looked at her like she'd just handed him a miracle. "You can stay here tonight," she said, placing a folded blanket at the foot of the cot. "Tomorrow, I'll talk to someone. Maybe you can get some temp work, cleaning or something. It's not much, but it's warm." He gave the smallest of nods. "Thanks, Claire." She blinked. "You read my badge." He half smiled. Old habit. That should have been her first clue. The next morning, Claire returned through the side entrance, juggling coffee and a soggy umbrella. And there he was, freshly shaved, clean hospital scrubs, standing outside the janitor's closet with a mop bucket. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "They said I could start today." "Seriously?" He shrugged. "Said they were short-staffed." I didn't argue. His name tag read Ethan C. From that moment on, he became part of the background. Mopping floors. Emptying trash. Always in motion. Always quiet. But Claire noticed things. He never asked where things were, he just knew. By day 2, he was navigating the hospital like someone who'd memorized the blueprints. He knew where the supply closets were, when the pharmacy made late-night deliveries, and even which nurses slipped away early to sneak a cigarette. He wasn't just observant, he was precise. Once, she caught him staring at the hospital's evacuation map near the fire exit for a little too long. You lost? She asked playfully. He glanced at her, then back at the map. Just like knowing where all the exits are. His answer was casual. Too casual. There were more signs. The way his hands never bore the calluses of manual labor. The way he stood, shoulders back, alert, like a man trained for something much bigger than janitorial work. And then there was the time she walked in on him organizing the break room. Not just wiping counters, organizing. Chairs symmetrically aligned. Sugar packets sorted by color. The clipboard that tracked food orders was open in front of him, even though that had nothing to do with his job. You're thorough, she joked. I like things neat. Claire laughed. You sure you haven't done this before? He looked up, and for a second, just one, something flickered in his eyes. Not humor. Not gratitude. Recognition. That was the moment she knew, this man wasn't who he said he was. But instead of backing away, she tilted her head, curious. You're not just a janitor, are you? He froze. Just a beat too long. I'm a guy trying to keep things clean, he said. She didn't press. Not yet. But the mystery lingered like steam off a fresh cup of coffee. Later that night, she walked past the break room again. The light was on. He was inside, cleaning the same countertop for the third time. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. You know, most of the staff doesn't even wipe down that thing once. He glanced over his shoulder. Then I guess I'm just overachieving. She smiled, half amused, half suspicious. I think you're hiding something. He paused. Then shrugged. Everyone is. She didn't disagree. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that the man folding napkins and aligning chairs like a soldier on parade had once stood in courtrooms with billion-dollar corporations on trial. That before he'd ever touched a mop, he had held the power to bring empires down. He wasn't there to clean floors. He was there to clean out something far more dangerous. And Claire? She was about to become the only person he trusted in a place full of secrets. The real question wasn't why he acted like a spy. It was how long it would take before Claire realized she wasn't just helping a stranger. She was helping a man who had come to destroy everything she thought was safe. Ethan Cross became a ghost in the machine. He wasn't loud. Wasn't disruptive. But somehow, he was everywhere. Claire would see him pushing his mop through the pediatric wing at dawn, then spot him again outside the pharmacy by noon, and later hear someone say he'd been helping restock the supply closet 3 floors up. He blended into the hospital like wallpaper, quiet, consistent, invisible if you weren't paying attention. But Claire was paying attention. It started with little things. She caught him taking out the trash behind the operating room wing and saw him pause, eyes locked on a clipboard left on a rolling cart. Just for a second. Then it was gone, like he never noticed it at all. Another time, she passed him outside the director's office. He was pretending to scrub the wall, but his eyes kept flicking to the nameplate. She teased him later. You always clean like you're casing the joint. He smiled. Maybe I just like to know where everything is. She laughed. But inside, her gut whispered, that wasn't a joke. He had a small notebook, leather-bound and water-resistant. She only saw it once, late one evening, when she'd gone to the janitor's locker room to grab spare gloves. The door had been slightly ajar. Ethan sat on the bench, scribbling furiously, the notebook propped against his thigh. She caught glimpses, lists, symbols, maybe diagrams. And tiny, neat handwriting that didn't look like it belonged to someone barely scraping by. He looked up. Saw her. And just closed it. Night notes, he said calmly. Helps me remember where the scuff marks are. Right, she said, smiling. But she wasn't buying it anymore. Still, she didn't stop him. She didn't report him. In fact, she found herself defending him when other nurses asked about the new janitor who always seemed to be around. "He's harmless," she told them. "Actually kind of helpful." That was only partly true. Yes, Ethan restocked carts and fixed a broken force stand when no one asked him to. Yes, he helped Nurse Myra find her missing locket in the laundry bin. And once, when a toddler coded in the ER, he was the one who cleared the path to the elevator in seconds flat. But it was how he moved that kept nagging at Claire. He didn't walk. He patrolled. He didn't glance. He scanned. Even when he smiled, it never quite reached his eyes. One morning, Claire found a sticky note on her locker. "Locker 112 jammed again. Maintenance won't fix it unless you ask twice." She chuckled. But then realized she hadn't told anyone about her broken locker. Not even in passing. Yet somehow, Ethan knew. Another day, she came into the break room and found her favorite vending machine snack already sitting on the table. Granola bar. Almond butter. The exact one. He walked in seconds later, towel slung over his shoulder. "Figured you'd skip breakfast again." She blinked. "Are you reading minds now?" "Just patterns," he said, shrugging. That word stuck with her. Patterns. It was the word doctors used when diagnosing illness. It was the word detectives used when tracking behavior. It wasn't a janitor's word. Claire told herself it was harmless. Just a strange, observant guy with an uncanny ability to memorize routines. But one night changed that. She stayed late to finish her notes and walked past the central pharmacy window. Through the glass, she spotted Ethan. Not cleaning, reading. He was facing a shipment log, hands behind his back like he didn't want to touch anything. His eyes moved line by line, like someone decoding something only he understood. Claire froze. This was no janitor on break. This was surveillance. She didn't confront him. Not then. She just watched. And when he finally turned to leave, his eyes met hers through the glass. Neither of them blinked. He didn't wave. Didn't smile. Just nodded. Once. Then walked away. That night, she couldn't sleep. She tossed. Turned. Replayed the moment in her head. Part of her was angry. Who was he? Why lie? But another part, the part she hated the most, still trusted him. He hadn't stolen anything. Hadn't hurt anyone. If anything, he helped. He listened. He noticed. And somehow, without ever really trying, he made her feel less alone. She remembered the night he'd cut his palm on a cracked mirror. She had grabbed a first aid kit and made him sit while she bandaged him up. "Doesn't even hurt," he said. "I don't care," she replied. "You still don't get to bleed alone." He had looked at her, really looked at her, like no one had in years. Not just seeing her face, but her. In that moment, she saw something behind his eyes. Not fear. Not guilt. Grief. Ethan wasn't just hiding something. He was running from it. The next day, he brought her coffee without being asked. He had drawn a tiny smiley face on the lid. And as she took a sip, he said, quietly, "You're too good for this place, you know." Claire tilted her head. Says the guy who can take apart a vending machine blindfolded. He chuckled. "I meant it." She stared at him. There was so much she didn't know. But for now, she let it go. Because deep down, some small voice in her heart whispered the most dangerous thought of all. Maybe he's here for a reason. He never meant to stay this long. Ethan had rules, strict ones. Blend in. Gather data. Don't get attached. And yet, here he was, standing in the hallway outside the nurse's station, memorizing Claire Robin's laugh like it was a password he couldn't afford to forget. It started small. She'd walk past him during her shift, mutter something sarcastic under her breath, and he'd chuckle softly, always a second late. Their inside jokes were built from exhaustion and vending machine coffee. But slowly, something shifted. He began noticing more than just patient records and inventory discrepancies. He noticed her. The way she bit her lip when reading lab results. The way her shoulders dropped an inch when her favorite song played faintly from another nurse's phone. The way she always saved the strawberry-flavored syrup for the kids who hated medicine. She had a system too, except hers was made of compassion. One evening, he walked into the break room to find her alone, staring blankly at her phone. She quickly locked the screen, forced a smile. "Tired?" he asked. She nodded. "Yeah. Just life stuff." He didn't pry. But that night, while taking out the garbage, he passed her in the staff parking lot, curled into the driver's seat of her old Toyota Corolla, silently crying with her forehead against the steering wheel. She never saw him. But he saw everything. From that moment, his mission blurred. He still tracked the red flags, missing medicine, duplicate invoices, unauthorized patient charges. But between the pages of his notebook, scribbled in the margins of chemical names and shipment codes, were things like: Claire skipped lunch again. Claire limping slightly. Sprained ankle? Claire smiled less today. Then came the phone call. He didn't mean to overhear it. She was in the locker room, talking softly, her voice muffled by the tile. "Mom, I know. I'll send something by Friday. Just don't skip his meds, okay?" Pause. "No, don't tell Dad. He's already stretched. I'll figure it out." Another pause. "I'll cover the copay somehow." Ethan stood just outside the door, frozen. She wasn't just kind. She was drowning. That night, long after she'd gone home, Ethan stood in front of the donation box in the hospital chapel. The hallway was empty. The lights dimmed. He pulled an envelope from his pocket, emergency cash he kept hidden, not part of the mission. Inside, $4,000. He slipped the envelope in. Wrote only 4 words on the donor slip. "For Nurse Claire, from someone you once made smile." He didn't sign it. The next morning, she stood in front of the bulletin board, holding the note like it was a puzzle piece to a life she couldn't quite solve. She looked around the room. Ethan kept mopping, pretending not to notice. That night, she found him in the break room, a brown paper bag in her hand. "I got you something," she said, sliding a sandwich across the table. He blinked. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said, sitting across from him. "Neither did the person who left $4,000 in the chapel box this morning." He stayed silent. "I just thought," she hesitated, eyes softening, "maybe they'd want you to eat something, too." They ate in silence, the hum of the vending machines the only sound between them. He watched her. She stared at the floor. And somewhere inside him, the armor cracked. He was here to expose corruption. But the truth? He didn't want to leave anymore. She'd gotten under his skin. Into his thoughts. Into places he'd spent years locking away. He thought about telling her everything. About the girl whose mother had begged him for help. About the fake drugs and the hidden records and the people dying because of greed. But every time she smiled at him, just smiled, he didn't want to ruin it. Until the moment came when he couldn't help himself. It was a quiet night. No sirens. No emergencies. She sat alone in the break room, rubbing her temples, fatigue in every movement. He slid into the chair beside her. "Want to know something?" She looked up, eyes heavy. "Only if it's good." He hesitated. "You remind me of someone." Yeah? Who? My mom. Claire blinked, surprised. She was a nurse too, Ethan said. Worked late. Forgot to eat. Always worried more about others than herself. What happened to her? He stared at the floor. She believed in the system. It let her down. Claire reached across the table, touched his hand. I'm sorry. He swallowed hard. He wasn't supposed to care. But in that moment, he would have given up the entire investigation just to protect her from the very thing he came here to destroy. She didn't know it yet. But she had already saved him once. And soon, he'd have to decide. Tell her the truth and lose her. Or lie to her face and protect the mission. Either way, something was going to break. And he knew it would be his heart first. The night she caught him, the hospital was too quiet. One of those eerie lulls where even the monitors seemed to hold their breath. Claire was heading back to the break room after a late patient round, chart clutched in hand, her mind too tired to think straight. But as she passed the records office, something caught her eye, a faint glow leaking from under the door. The lights were off. That office was supposed to be locked after hours. Only department heads had clearance. Curious, and a little uneasy, she crept closer. Through the narrow glass window, she saw him. Ethan. Not mopping. Not cleaning. Typing. Fast. His fingers moved like someone who had done this 1,000 times. The monitor glowed with patient files, charts, archived records from months ago. Files she hadn't seen in years. Claire's stomach dropped. One name blinked on the screen. Calhoun. She felt the ground shift beneath her. That was the same last name the woman in the ER had whispered months ago, clutching her daughter's photo, sobbing quietly in the corner. They said it was a complication. I think they lied. Claire flung the door open. Ethan. He froze. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then instinctively hit a hidden keystroke. The screen went black. He turned slowly. His face drained of color. No excuse. No defense. Just guilt. Raw and plain. I can explain, he whispered. Her voice shook. Start explaining. Now. He stepped forward. Claire, I didn't want you to find out like this. No, she snapped, backing away. You don't get to say my name like we're still something real. He looked down. You've been lying this whole time, she said, voice cracking. You lived in our rooms, worked beside us, smiled at me. What was I? Just access? An easy mark? Ethan's shoulders sagged. It wasn't like that. Not at first. But then... He stopped. Claire crossed her arms, trembling. But then what? His voice dropped to a whisper. Then you mattered. Silence. Long, suffocating. She stared at him, her heart in free fall. I work for a private agency, he began. We investigate medical corruption, bad drugs, fake trials, system cover-ups. I was sent here to confirm what we already suspected. Someone inside this hospital is distributing counterfeit medication. The kind that kills. And someone's covering it up. Her mouth went dry. And that night, in the rain, I was already watching this place. But the storm hit harder than expected. I got stuck. Was trying to wait it out, then he paused. You pulled me out of it. Literally. She shook her head, biting back tears. You pretended to be homeless. Yes. You lied to everyone. Yes. Her voice broke. You lied to me. He looked up sharply. No. Not all of it. The job, yes. The name, yes. But what I felt, what I feel every time I see you. That wasn't a lie. Claire backed away. You used me. I did, he said, his voice barely a breath. And I regret it. Every day. Every moment. She couldn't breathe. How long have you been doing this? 3 years, he said. But this was different. Because of you. She laughed bitterly. Right. I made you grow a conscience. No, he said softly. You reminded me I had one. The words hit like a punch to the chest. She looked away first. Her fists clenched. Her world spinning. You should have told me, she whispered. I could have helped. I couldn't. If anyone found out I was investigating, they would have scrubbed everything. The evidence. The paper trails. The victims. And me? She asked. Was I collateral damage? His face twisted with pain. You were the only thing I wanted to protect. She stared at him through a blur of betrayal. Then she turned and walked out. The hospital doors hissed shut behind her, and the cold slapped her in the face. It had started raining again. She didn't stop for her coat. Her badge. Her phone. She just walked. Fast. Furious. Shaking. Behind her, Ethan ran after her, barefoot in the slick hallway, coatless in the downpour. He found her standing under the bus stop shelter, arms wrapped around herself, rain streaming down her face like it was trying to drown out the truth. Claire, he shouted, slipping on the wet pavement. She turned, startled. Her face pale. Wet. Devastated. What are you doing here? She asked, voice brittle. I had to find you, he said, panting. You've said enough. No, he said, stepping closer. I haven't. Not the things that matter. She folded her arms tighter. Then say them. But don't expect me to believe anything anymore. He nodded. Slowly. Rain ran down his face like tears he couldn't control. I never meant to fall for you, he said. But the night you pulled me in from the storm, you didn't just save me, you saw me. And that terrified me more than anything. She didn't speak. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small cloth, carefully protected in a plastic pouch. He unfolded it. A handkerchief. White. Simple. Embroidered in the corner, Claire. I had this made the week after you helped me, he said, voice shaking. I didn't know why. I just knew. I wanted to remember the moment someone made me believe again. She took it with trembling hands. Stared at the stitching. The rain. His face. I know I lied, he said. But what I feel for you, that's the only part that's real. I'd trade everything I've ever known to go back and do it right. Claire stared at the cloth. Then at him. Her tears mixed with the rain, but she didn't wipe them away. I was so angry, she whispered. Not because you lied, but because I didn't want it to be a lie. He took a step forward, cautiously. Then let me prove it wasn't. And for a moment, just a moment, she didn't walk away. She didn't forgive him. But she didn't run either. In that pause, in that impossible stillness, something began to crack open. Because maybe, just maybe, the worst betrayal wasn't the lie. Maybe it was the truth that followed. And the way it still hurt. The next morning, they didn't speak about the night in the rain. They just acted. Something between them had shifted, not quite forgiveness, not yet healing, but a silent vow, no more lies. No more silence. Claire walked into the hospital like she always did, badge clipped to her scrub pocket, hair tied back, charts in hand. But this time, she wasn't just a nurse. She was a witness. And Ethan? He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was the detonator. That afternoon, in the cramped break room between shifts, Claire pulled a flash drive from her bag. She set it on the table between them like a loaded weapon. "I gave a copy to a journalist I trust," she said quietly. "All we need is confirmation. One email, and it goes public." Ethan stared at it for a beat, then nodded. "Let's burn the whole thing down." They didn't wait. That evening, while half the hospital was distracted with a surprise fire drill Ethan had orchestrated, Claire used her badge to get them into the restricted pharmaceutical storage unit. Cameras had been conveniently looped, courtesy of a software tool Ethan borrowed from his former agency. Inside, rows of cabinets glowed under cold white lights. Ethan moved fast. Pulled open drawers. Snapped high-res photos. Labeled bottles. Shipment logs. Lot numbers. Claire stood watch, heart racing. Then he found it. A batch number matching the drug that had killed the Calhoun girl, hidden under a new name. Smuggled in under fake invoices. Repackaged. Rebranded. "It's here," he whispered. "They've been injecting patients with counterfeit meds for months." Claire felt her knees weaken. "How many?" Ethan looked at her. "Too many." Over the next 48 hours, they gathered everything: screenshots of altered patient records, invoices signed by fake vendors, internal memos suggesting hush payments, even security footage of deliveries being signed off after hours, by none other than Dr. Calvin Holbrook, the hospital's director. It all pointed to one thing: a multi-million-dollar scheme. A pharmaceutical laundering ring. And the patients? Just collateral damage. They were ready to go public. But the system moved first. The next day, Dr. Holbrook called Claire into his office. He was calm. Too calm. She stepped inside. He locked the door behind her. "I know what you've been doing," he said, sliding a printed photo across the desk. It was her and Ethan, caught entering the drug storage unit at night. "You're smarter than this," he said with a cold smile. "But not smart enough." She kept her voice even. "So? You going to fire me?" He chuckled. "No. I'm going to offer you a deal." He leaned forward. "Walk away. Quietly. I make a few calls, your license stays clean, your job stays intact. Your little friend disappears. And no one gets hurt." Claire stared at him. Then smiled, just a little. "You know," she said softly, "you sound like every man who's ever underestimated a woman." That night, she met Ethan in the staff supply closet, her hands still shaking. She told him everything. "We go public. Now." "I'm with you," he said without hesitation. An hour later, Claire hit send. Within minutes, her contact at the paper responded, "We've been waiting for this. It's going front page at dawn." And then, everything exploded. The headlines hit like a bomb. Hospital director implicated in counterfeit drug scheme. Whistleblower nurse and undercover investigator break silence. Patients died. Profits rose. Truth emerges. Local news stations camped outside the hospital. National outlets picked up the story within hours. Social media ignited. Claire and Ethan were escorted out of the building by security the next morning, fired under charges of misconduct and identity fraud. But they walked out with their heads held high. Because 30 minutes later, federal agents walked in. By noon, Dr. Holbrook was in handcuffs. By sunset, the hospital board had suspended 5 senior administrators. The Department of Justice launched a full-scale investigation. The pharmaceutical company behind the scheme saw its stocks plummet overnight. Its CEO resigned before dawn. Ethan sat across from a panel of federal prosecutors, handing over encrypted drives, binders of evidence, and video testimony from families who had lost loved ones. Claire stood in front of a packed courtroom days later, her hand raised, her voice unwavering as she told the story of what she saw, what she missed, what she could never ignore again. This wasn't just about broken rules, she told the jury. It was about broken people. Broken trust. The verdict came fast, guilty. Dr. Holbrook was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for fraud, conspiracy, and criminal negligence. Several of his co-conspirators faced similar charges. The pharmaceutical company was fined, dismantled, and forced to pay out millions to victims' families. Justice wasn't perfect, but it was loud, public, relentless, and it was finally served. As Claire and Ethan watched the news unfold from a quiet diner on the edge of town, she reached across the table and took his hand. "You did it," she whispered. He shook his head. "No," he said softly. "We did." And somewhere in the background, the rain had started again. But this time, it didn't feel like a storm. It felt like a cleansing. 1 year later, the rain returned. Not the cold, punishing kind that stripped people bare and tested their wool, but a soft, steady drizzle that felt almost sacred. Like the sky was finally learning how to weep gently. On the corner of Oak Ridge Avenue, a building once forgotten now buzzed with life. The windows were lit with warmth. Inside, nurses moved with purpose. Children clutched stuffed animals. Elderly patients smiled behind oxygen masks. Volunteers handed out blankets, hot tea, and hope. Above the entrance, a hand-painted sign swayed lightly in the breeze. Robin's Light Community Clinic, care without condition. Claire stood just beneath it, clipboard in hand, a soft blue raincoat draped over her scrubs. Her name badge now read, Director of Care. And she wore it like armor. She had built this place from the ashes of betrayal and the bricks of justice. The settlement from the lawsuit had helped fund it, but the spirit behind it? That came from something deeper. Something no scandal could touch. Kindness. The kind that took in strangers during storms. The kind that asked for nothing, but changed everything. Inside, a mother hugged her daughter after a free asthma screening. A former patient dropped off a tray of cookies. A retired nurse who'd once quit out of disillusionment had returned, smiling, sleeves rolled up. This was the future Claire had once only whispered about in the break room over vending machine granola bars. And now, it was real. She stepped onto the small stage in the lobby, facing a crowd of friends, patients, and staff. The room hushed. "This clinic," she began, "is more than a place to get care. It's a promise that no one, no matter how poor, sick, or forgotten, will ever feel unseen again." The room erupted in applause. And as she stepped down, someone appeared beside her. Ethan. He wore a clean white button-up, sleeves rolled, collar slightly wrinkled like he'd dressed in a rush. He stood a little taller now, no longer hiding, no longer carrying secrets. Just a man with nothing to prove and everything to give. He reached behind his back and pulled something out. A small box. Claire's heart stopped. Ethan dropped to one knee, the rain tapping gently against the glass behind him like a memory returning home. "Claire Robbins," he said, voice steady despite the lump in his throat, "you pulled me in from the storm when I had nothing. You gave me shelter, a second chance, and a reason to believe again." She gasped, hands covering her mouth. "I was never just the janitor," he continued. "And you were never just the nurse. You were the light. You still are. Will you marry me?" The crowd went still. She didn't cry. She laughed. Softly. Joyfully. The kind of laugh only someone who'd been broken before could laugh. Claire knelt to his level, cupped his face in her hands, and whispered just loud enough for the crowd to hear. "You were never just a stranger in the rain. You were my beginning." And as she kissed him, the crowd erupted in cheers. Some clapped. Some cried. One little girl yelled, "Say yes already." Outside, the rain fell a little harder, like the world had been waiting for this moment too. They stood together, forehead to forehead, in the middle of it all, two people who had once been buried under lies and loss, now standing in the open, washed clean by the truth. The clinic would go on. Patients would come and go. The world would keep turning. But in that moment, there was no past. No pain. No fear. Just light. And the promise of something finally, beautifully honest.